So, speaking about the possible reasons for the tropics being so rich in species, so rich in biodiversity, in other ways, we said that long-term stability, ice age refuges, larger area, or the abiotic hypothesis or the historical hypothesis, and more resources, less seasonality, and more biointeractions can be ecological hypotheses. There was this little drawing, something like this, which often students would be asking what is that about. So when we say that there's kind of a productivity or more resources, so I can also put here, this is the productivity hypothesis. Got it? So productivity hypothesis means that there are more resources in the tropics, and how this is often being drawn or explained or illustrated in course books is that there are different populations that fit next to each other. And so what we got here is, in this case, well, just as it's been shown in many cases, the resource abundance, so how much resources is available. And for like the temperate climate, we said it's something like this. What does it mean that we have this area? Well, I can just show. So this area, which tells us altogether how much of resources do we have available for various like species such as animals or plants, whatever they are. And in this case, if we just imagine animals, it actually means food. And that's why we bring up here examples like birds, different types of birds. How much food is available to these animals? And like in a temperate climate, if we think of like north of China, what kind of climate do you have? Some kind of temperate climate around Beijing. Nanjing is somewhere like subtropical already, but still we can imagine it a little bit in that way. And so here we would say that there are different populations that would actually be able to fit this somehow like this. Different populations of various species. Population 1, population 2, and population 3. I can just show it in such a way, but these we can think about being different species in general as well. So basically, again, we have this total area under the curve, which is available, and this would be used or be accessed by various populations. Now, if we think about how much of like resource or food a population or a species needs, I can just imagine these as being largely the same areas. So it's the same size that one species would need, or population would need. Just put like this. So this is the need that individual, maybe a little bit bigger, but anyhow, that individual populations would be in need of. Now, if we go to like the tropics, then it would be a different story. So here, compared to this overall area that we see here, the area, just to make it a little bit more beautiful, there you go. So the area under this curve is much smaller than what you got here. So different populations, if I think of the size or the need of energy or food or the resources in general, that we got here. So the same size, if I just imagine, I can squeeze it. So I can fit more of these species and their populations next to each other. So something like this, it's not very beautiful. Could be better to draw it in the classroom with chalk on the board. Let me make it like this. And so what I would say that here we have population 1, population 2, P3, P4, P5, and P6, which would mean that in this case we'd have twice as many different species and their populations, since individuals would become more of specialists, so they would only be interested in consuming a specific type of the resources. They're specialists. Different birds, for example, are going to be, if we think of like the Galapagos Islands as well, and Darwin's finches, the different kinds of birds will be living on various different kinds of seeds or food or even animals. They're like predators, carnivores. So in this case, they're not going to be generalists, because here we would say that the range of resources that individual species would be reliant on, it would be much wider. So individual like birds would be eating like plants, seeds, also animals like insects, maybe even like mice or whatever. Ever think of like a crow or a magpie or azure pie? So some of those species that would be present in Hohai campus as well in Jianing. So how would those behave? And compared to those in the tropics, in the true tropics, these individual species would be much more specialized on various types of resources or food, if we just want to simplify it. But this can be also present or to some extent valid in the case of plants as well. So how plants are reliant on a specific type of soil or resource, or in general habitat area, climate, and so on. But in the case of like animals, it's much easier to make examples about this kind of theory of the productivity hypothesis. How in the tropics, because the amount of resources, energy in general, food would be present, there could be more species existing next to each other. And this is again all based on energy that is related to temperature, sunshine. Possibly again here just thinking about how this area is located on the planet, so how the tropics are somewhere in the central zone to the north and south of the equator, and that's where most of the sunshine would be able to reach the surface overall throughout the year. There were less of seasonal differences, and that would mean this would be the zone in the planet that is the richest in the resources based on the highest amount of like sunshine or energy that will reach the surface. So this is one part of the story that we can think of here, more resources and the productivity hypothesis. And also we can think about not only less seasonability, because of course that is It's quite evident. But what the more bio interactions would mean, so in this case, if we have like higher trees as well, so we know that in like the rainforest, it's not only simply trees that we would find, but the tropical rainforest would mean that trees are going to be extremely high, like say 60 meters in height. So that means like 20 stories building can be 60 meters in height. So that's how I just show. These are going to be extremely large trees, independently from how they look like. And so in these different zones, different areas, there would be different niches. This is niche, this is the word we need to know. The different niches would develop depending on the amount of like sunshine present, the structure of the canopy of the tree. So this is the canopy of the tree, how it would look like, how much moisture there is, like rainfall, temperature, and so on, differences, and also like proximity to the ground. So the point is that different kinds of niches would develop in different areas, and these niches would mean different kinds of like bird species and so on to be present, such as the toucan with the huge beaks would be allocated or belonging to a certain niche. So just to think about what kind of species there might be, which also can be listed here as a specialist species according to another hypothesis of the ecological hypothesis, why we have so many species and so rich biodiversity in the tropics. So this is just a little drawing again what the niches are about. So what these bio interactions would be about, just in very simple terms. So this is then a little bit of drawing for lecture number 2.